But without further ado, we're going to go to our next keynote. We are so thrilled to have this guy here. It is incredible to count with one of the co-founders of Techstars. Techstars is literally, woo, 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 there they are! They literally one of the first and the most successful accelerator programs out there. I absolutely adore their philosophy and watching the growth and the success of this company for many years. Amazing to see them expand into London, now Berlin, now just recently South Africa, and starting to enter into 4 corners of the globe. I also see a lovely trend of Techstars hiring Irish people, which I think also works, hopefully adding to their success, right, Brian? But thrilled to have David on stage here, so take advantage. You might get the opportunity to ask a few questions, so get here, and I'm going to turn the stage over to David Brown, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I have my bottle of water in case I have a Marco Rubio moment. Do you guys know what a Marco Rubio moment is? No. He's a presidential candidate who is always thirsty and needs a drink of water. It's great to be in Madrid. I've traveled the world, and I've actually never been in Spain. This is my first time. And thank you very much for the warm welcome. So I landed this morning. I took a drive over here. That's all I've seen so far, but so far it's great, and what a great venue actually to have this conference. My name is David Brown. I am the co-founder of Techstars and managing partner there, and super excited to be able to talk a little bit with all of you today about the distribution of talent and opportunity. Those are some big words, but what does it mean? It means the concept that entrepreneurs really are born all around the world. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my first startup when I was in college. I'm 51 years old now. I've never had a job interview in my entire life. And I've done startup after startup after startup, and I have this wonderful, incredible job where I get to work with brilliant people who are changing the world in their own ways every single day. I get to come to work every day and see if I can help them chase their dreams in some small way. And guess what? That happens everywhere, right? That doesn't just happen in one place of the world. Entrepreneurs are born, we're born with this little mental defect, right? Where we, decided somehow that we wanted to do this crazy journey called entrepreneurship and create startups. And I'll tell you in a little bit about my journey in that respect. But how many of you in the audience self-identify as entrepreneurs? Raise your hand. Awesome. So at least half. The other half of you are probably sleeping still. It is a great thing to have so many entrepreneurs. And I just want to show just a few pictures, right, from some of our programs. And this is what entrepreneurship is all about. It's people working hard on their product, on their ideas. These folks are trying to change the world in their way, on their products. Entrepreneurship isn't just about individuals, it's about teamwork. It's about working in groups. It's about listening to each other, because that's what entrepreneurs want to do. We want to share best practices and understand from each other what things are working in your business and what is it about your business that I can apply to my business. These are some entrepreneurs in Texas. Entrepreneurs are type A personalities, right? What did this guy just do? I was there that day. That's Matt Ellis. Matt just won a game of ping pong, right? That's entrepreneurship, right? You are striving to succeed every day. And when you get your first customer, what do, right? You celebrate. So where are entrepreneurs? These are tech hubs all around the world. And you notice that they're clustered around where there are people. Because the people who are born to be entrepreneurs are born everywhere in the world. Yet, many would believe that there's only one place to start a company. I'll let you look for the green dot. That green dot obviously is Silicon Valley. And it used to be that if you wanted to be successful in a startup, you had to move there. that was where the investors were, right? That's where the ecosystem was. That's where you had to build a business. But that world has really changed. And yet many of us still believe, not me, but many folks believe that that is still the only place to start a company. But think about that, right? Do all of you who have startups want to move to Silicon Valley? Do you know how expensive it is to live in Silicon Valley today? Do you know how expensive it would be if all of us decided to move there? It's not realistic. The days of going to Sand Hill Road and pitching venture capitalists in a fancy boardroom, those days are over. The world is changing. The world has become one big interconnected network. And all of us are helping change that by starting our businesses elsewhere. VCs in the days to come will no longer sit in those boardrooms on Sand Hill Road, but will engage into the network, participate in programs, meet all of you where you live, find ways to help you, give first, right? And then ultimately invest their capital in the most promising startups. It no longer makes sense to start a business in Silicon Valley. It's funny because when I give the talk, when I speak in Silicon Valley, I try this experiment. I say to the audience, how many of you are actually from Silicon Valley? And I get people to raise their hand. And almost nobody does, right? People have moved there from elsewhere, right? Entrepreneurs are born all around the world. And this is where successful businesses are being created. And I just took a random sampling of different companies from different countries, Hootsuite from Canada, right? Skype here in Europe and Spotify, Easy Taxi from Brazil, of course Alibaba, you know, an enormous success story. There are lots of great companies that have been created all around the world. And guess what? If you overlay that map that I was showing before of the location of the entrepreneurs, not surprisingly, right, there's a strong overlap between where these companies are created and where the entrepreneurs are clustered. So let me tell you just briefly a little bit about my journey. I'm Canadian. I was born in Montreal, Canada. I started as an entrepreneur back in the 1980s. In the 1980s, being an entrepreneur was not cool. Being an entrepreneur was a little bit like being an inventor. It was that thing your crazy uncle did, on weekends. And my family, my parents, my friends, when I said I wanted to start my own business, they said, well, what are you going to do for a living? Right? It wasn't accepted. Today, you go to engineering schools, everybody wants to do a startup. Back then, I went to engineering school. Everybody wanted to go work for Microsoft or IBM. The cool kids wanted to work at Microsoft, and the stodgy ones wanted to work at IBM. And I knew that that wasn't me, right? I knew that. I knew that in college. I had this incredible experience where I won a lottery and I got a job working for the government as a summer job. And I knew that that was exactly what I didn't want to do for a living. The joke in the government office, this is their joke, is why are there white lines in the hallways of government offices? And the answer is so the people who are arriving late don't bump into the people who are leaving early. That's what it was like. Nobody was working hard. They were punching a clock, right? Except I had this crazy supervisor who, had disheveled hair and was coding away on something in the corner, staying late at night. And I got to know him a bit, and it turned out he was doing a startup. And then after my summer gig was over working for the government, he invited me to join his startup. It wasn't a great success, but it gave me the taste. And I discovered that at that time, there was no ecosystem where I lived in Montreal, Canada. The ecosystem in Montreal, if you were an entrepreneur, you were sort of all by yourself. And so I wound up discovering that the United States, at least at that time, was the place to be. And so I got a job offer from another startup that was affiliated with our startup that was based in Miami, Florida. So I moved from Montreal to Miami. It was a funny story because I'm 22 years old. I just graduated from college. I'd just broken up with a girlfriend. My lease was up on my apartment. All my friends were moving away. And so I got this job offer, and 3 days later, I accepted right away and started 3 days later in Miami. And all I did when I got the offer in Miami was fly home, pack all my stuff into my car, with a plan to leave it at my parents' house until I could figure out how to get it down to Florida. And I went to a wedding, and during the wedding, my car got stolen. So I had this amazing fresh start. I moved down to the United States. I moved to Miami, Florida. I had the jeans and t-shirts that I had bought right after the wedding, and that's all I owned. And there, I worked for another startup. And we got things going, and I had this great experience of sort of building something from scratch and working for an American entrepreneur who was willing to bet the farm every day and figure out how to get the business going. Eventually, I met this guy, David Cohen, who's been my co-founder on all the businesses, including Techstars I've done since then. We worked together in Miami. And we started a business together that we ultimately moved to Boulder, Colorado. Another crazy story there, right? Boulder's a tiny little town, 100,000 people. And we chose to go based on a napkin. We went to a restaurant, we wrote out a couple of places we wanted to live. We scratched out the bad ideas that the other two co-founders had. Boulder was the only one left, and so we moved and built a business in Boulder. And it wound up being a great success, and we had a good exit, and we ran another business. We started another business there, and it was a great failure. And then ultimately, we started a third business there, which was called Techstars. And so people ask me all the time, why did you start your business in Boulder, Colorado, a town of 100,000 people, right? And the answer is that's where we lived, right? We had a life there. We had home there. We had family there. We had friends there. That's where we wanted to live. We didn't want to go to Silicon Valley. Of course, Techstars now has grown over the years. And this is where we run accelerator programs. The slide is out of date. We announced, as Liz was saying, we announced a couple more. We have one in Cape Town and one in Tel Aviv that we announced yesterday. And so we are on 4 continents now, sort of helping serve entrepreneurs all around the world. And what we're trying to do is try to help by creating this global network so that whether you start your business in Cape Town, Tel Aviv, Silicon Valley, Madrid, or anywhere else in the world, that you can become part of something bigger, something global, that you can become connected into this network, into this ecosystem of mentors and investors that are around the world, because they will come here, right? Or they will go to Cape Town, or they will go elsewhere in the world to find the most promising startups. We now have employees, 130 employees at Techstars that are scattered a little bit all over the world. And we do have employees, although we don't run accelerators in Silicon Valley, we do have employees in Silicon Valley because it is an important part of the global ecosystem. It is important that if you start a business here in Europe, or in South America, or in Africa, you will want those connections to be able to go into Silicon Valley, and we want to help facilitate that. And then through our merger with Startup Weekend and Startup Week, these are the locations worldwide where we now run events. There's 1,000 events every year all around the world in 120 or so countries, more countries than Starbucks is the statistic. And it's great to see how many fantastic entrepreneurs and businesses emerge from far away, far-flung places. So back to sort of our pictures of entrepreneurs a little bit. So this is Christelle. She's from Teslio. Teslio's from Estonia. A great company that came through our Austin program, has been tremendously successful in growing their business, Estonian-based. Estonia is a great hotspot for startups. GrabCab is another company that came through our Boston program, had a $100 million exit, right? Never based in Silicon Valley, not a US company, did fantastically well. Classics and Exotics is an example of a company that came from Israel and is building a great business there. The cowboys that we looked at earlier are actually from Poland. Their business is called VertKick, and they came through our program in San Antonio, fully embraced the cowboy culture, right? Everybody referred to them as the Polish cowboys, but they were building a great business back in Warsaw, which they call home. So what do we do, right? Which is, I want to leave a little, I'm going to go through this a little quickly because I want to leave a little time for Q&A. But what do we do to make sure that our startup communities around the world can be as successful as Silicon Valley? The definitive book on the subject is Startup Communities by my other co-founder at Techstars, Brad Feld. And in Startup Communities, if you haven't read it, it's a great opportunity to figure out how you can help in your local ecosystem build a community. There are 4 parts to how to do it, and he refers to it as the Boulder thesis. The first is startup communities need to be led by entrepreneurs, right? It's all of us that need to organize the meetups or the sessions or the exchange of ideas that create a community. This can't be some government program. The second is it's a long-term view. Brad likes to say it's 20 years from wherever you are. So in Boulder, we started 8 years ago. And so then he said it'll take you 20 years. Now he'll say it's another 20 years. If you start here now, it's going to be 20 years. And the point here is take the time to get it right, to build an ecosystem. Don't be rushed, right? Have some community events, engage across the entrepreneurial stack, and you will build something magic in any community. The third point to the Boulder thesis is a philosophy of inclusiveness. You want to bring in, it's not just entrepreneurs. You want to bring in universities, you want to bring in government, you want to bring in service providers because they will be helpful. And then lastly, you want to create events that allow entrepreneurs to rally around the entire entrepreneurial stack. So an accelerator, a startup weekend, a startup week, those are events where entrepreneurs and the entire ecosystem come together to celebrate in a moment in time, in a single place, entrepreneurship in a local community. Doing that, doing a cocktail party or a dinner is not enough, right? You have to have these events. So those are some ideas. On how to engage in your ecosystem. And my clock is telling me that I'm running out of time a little bit, so I want to sort of see if there are any questions that I can answer. You can just shout them out, I think. Oh, thank you. Thanks for the applause. But I was looking for questions. So maybe raise your hand if you have a question. Let's try that. Let's go. Yeah. The Techstars? Yeah. What is the most valuable asset that somebody could bring to an entrepreneur, or that we bring? I think it's the network, right? I think the ability to connect with a giant ecosystem that's worldwide. So if you're an entrepreneur in Europe, but you want to go to New York and build your business in America, right? That is something that you want people to introduce you to so that you can understand the differences in culture or product or customs to be able to be successful in that environment. Same is true not only of the United States, but South America or Asia, etc. You want connections to mentors, to investors, to other entrepreneurs in local areas. Maybe you're traveling and you're going to spend some time in Cape Town or Tel Aviv and you want to get engaged there. What we try to do is bring together all communities so that we are all functioning as one. Yeah. There's a microphone coming. Just trying to get them in quick because we're running out of.
Hi, what Techstars looks in for startups, and what are the criteria that at what stage usually these startups are accepted at Techstars?
Yeah, so we have 6 criteria. Have you heard them? Team, 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 market, progress, idea. And the notion is that it's people that matter most. And it matters so much that it's enough to take up the first 3 spots. Great founders with a mediocre idea will do so much better than mediocre people with a great idea. And that's the most important criteria. Any other questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you follow up? I mean, once they are out of your accelerator, I mean, how do you keep them engaged with the community of Techstars along the years until their success or their failure for the next round?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, in the early days of Techstars, we didn't think of it, right? The first year, the founders were the, 9 other companies that graduated with you, and the second year, it was the 10 guys from last year. Now there's 700 companies that have graduated from Techstars, 1,700 individuals, approximately. And so we have dedicated full-time personnel that help engage the alumni. That might be social events in various communities around the world, which we do on the second Thursday of every month. But it's also people like Don Loeb, who's our Vice President of Corporate Development, who's full-time in Silicon Valley, facilitating relationships with companies like Facebook or Snapchat, Twitter, et cetera. He's built those relationships there so that if you're a founder anywhere in the world that's been through one of our programs, we can help you build business development relationships in the Valley and elsewhere. So there's there's a whole bunch of different ways. It is really important that post-accelerator, that we take advantage of this network, that founders take advantage of this network to be able to continue to grow and scale their business. All right, last question. Go for it. I'll repeat it.
My name is Luis. I come from Germany, and it's a small city. Would be the Boulder of Germany. It's Bremerhaven, 100,000 inhabitants. And we are going to have, in 1 week, the Startups Weekend. I just started my own startup, and they are even showing me as a role model because it's not a place where they have experience. What would be for you, I don't know, a hint or a suggestion, some advice I can give the people who are really lost? They don't really know. The people who are coming there, they don't even know what is an accelerator.
Yeah, I was trying to put that slide back up. So the first thing I would do is encourage them to read that book, Startup Communities by Brad Feld. It's full of advice on how to start that community. Look, 100,000 people is not too small. We have a startup weekend, we have a startup week in Boulder. It's 100,000 people. We have 4 accelerators in one small town. Now, it's taken some years to be able to build up to that level. But don't be discouraged. 100,000 is not too small to get a thriving startup community going. All right, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much, everybody.